I plunged into the bottomless depths of the novel I read, as if into another reality. In the original plot, Liu Ruyan's fate was predetermined, either she or me. According to the author's logic, the enemy must die so I could continue my journey. This seemed an immutable truth. However, fate played a cruel joke on me. I was transported to this world long before the main events. Now I'm just over 20 at the peak of my youth. And Liu Ruyan, she's still just a child, an ordinary schoolgirl who looks at me with that same childish trust like an older brother. The book described her as an anti-sexual daughter, broken by life, trampled into the dirt. I decided to change her future to break her out of this cycle, but I had no idea how dramatically her character would change when I met her. Wait, what's this? Why did she suddenly push me? This moment wasn't in the original. Brother Hekyang, do you even understand what's going on here? Hekyang and I discussed our affairs, joked about dating and what would happen when she grew up. It didn't matter, though. She snuggled into me, feeling the softness of the bed. Liu Ruyan suddenly grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward her. Her gaze was frighteningly clear, devoid of childish naivety. She licked her lips and whispered, "Brother, I'm already an adult today. Choose your words wisely." I nearly choked on my cola. Kyudai was sitting next to me, making sarcastic comments about my age and Ruyan's immaturity. I had to force myself not to spit out the drink. Kyudai continued, savoring every bite of barbecue and discussing acceptable limits. I waited for him to finish before replying, but he continued in his mocking manner. The atmosphere became so tense that sparks literally flew between us, enough to melt iron. I poured myself another Coke, trying to remain calm. Kyudai was acting like he was up to something, and it was unnerving. Liu Jia, the unloved third miss, I constantly heard whispers about her. They said she was still just a child, but I saw a wicked spark in her eyes. I picked up my chopsticks to distract myself with the meat, feeling a strange premonition growing inside me. I decided to speak to them directly. I see the future. I know what awaits everyone. Kyudai raised an eyebrow skeptically. And what did you see? That this little girl will become a real demon in the future, I replied. After that, something strange began. I was kicked under the table, my clothes were pulled. This interaction was more chaos than it was worth. Xiu Dai asked about the price of my predictions. I looked him over from head to toe, feeling the situation spiraling out of control. I instinctively recoiled. "You're delusional, you're a pervert," someone snapped. I didn't want to continue this absurdity. Xiu Dai adjusted his glasses and I glanced at my phone screen and realized it was time to go. "Eat more slowly," I told them, pointing to the meat I had brought. "At least understand who I really am. If you don't want to finish this, I'll take a portion for myself." "Bye, boss, good luck," I said to Kyudai and left the establishment. Out on the street, the realization hit me that the problems with this barbecue gathering were just the beginning. In fact, I wasn't lying. I remember this novel because I read it a month ago, scrolling through the endless notifications that rained down on me like the hero of this story. According to the plot, I was supposed to be the one to crush Liu Ruyan. In the book, she's the disgraced third miss who built an empire on lies and bloodshed, only to be killed by a car. I didn't want that. I decided to stay away from her. But reality turned out to be different. She wasn't the dark villain from the book. Now, before me, there was only a lonely, vulnerable girl, weighed down by family circumstances. Recently, before important negotiations, I gave the Liu family a plot of land in the east. Business circles assumed this was a move by the He family. Let them think what they want. I didn't care about the ground. I just wanted to enjoy the silence, planning my next steps and working with the team. What were they even gossiping about behind my back? Suddenly, I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned around and froze. There she was, a girl in a school uniform with a high ponytail. I hadn't noticed how she'd gotten there. There was a strange, almost innocent silliness in her gaze. "Have you had dinner?" I asked. She sat down silently opposite me and nodded. "I've already eaten." "Okay, then wait until I finish and we'll go," I replied. I began to fuss, packing my things. The food on the table seemed unnecessary. Ruyan, her backpack slung over her shoulders, was waiting for me. We walked out in silence. She followed me to the car and quietly settled into the back seat while I took the driver's seat. We drove out of the underground garage of the shopping center into the night city. Moonlight filtered through the clouds, illuminating the path. We rode in complete silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The road to my house flew by. From that day on, everything changed. She left the Liu family's past behind, heading towards a new point of no return. I stopped the car at a traffic light. The silence became unbearable and she finally spoke up. "Why did you do that day?" she asked, placing her hand on the door. I nervously tapped my fingers on the steering wheel. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to hide my awkwardness. Ruyan clenched her fist. "Why me? You could have chosen someone more beneficial for your business." "This isn't charity. The He family isn't used to operating at a loss," I replied dryly, though my insides were clenching. I grinned, realizing that a person's value to me had long been measured not by benefit. "I'm used to hiding in the shadows, knowing I'm not the best of my family, a useless brother, a superfluous person. I took you out of there because I know what it's like to be unwanted," I replied, looking at her through the mirror. "From now on, everything will be different." "Forget everything they said, I'll help you find your place," she asked hopefully. "Why do you need this?" Her voice trembled. I wondered. Maybe it was because I just wanted the happy ending the author hadn't given this heroine. She had been through a lot, the coldness of her parents, the bullying of her siblings, the beatings for the slightest offense. Her heart was closed, but I knew that even the strongest armor cracks. If I can change her fate, what will she become at the end of this journey? I pondered this, looking at the road, as if trying to peer beyond the boundaries of reality. She looked at me through the rearview mirror as if reading my mind. I decided to ask the most important question, understanding the gravity of the moment. "If I go against the entire structure of Liu's company, what will you do?" I asked. She answered without a moment's hesitation. "I'll help you." At that moment, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Silence fell over the car until Liu Ruyan broke it again. Her voice was light and carefree again. "The light's already green. Oh, I didn't even notice we passed that turn, and here's my villa." Usually it was just my parents and I who lived in this house, occasionally glancing at the sparse staff. Now, however, the atmosphere seemed different, more lively. We entered the house where the lights were still on. My parents were sitting on the sofa, my father, He Jaehyun, glued to the television, but I sensed they were waiting for us to return. Mother rose to greet me, and Liu Ruyan instinctively took a step back, hiding behind me. She looked so meek and gentle. "Good evening, why aren't you asleep yet?" I greeted my father. He Jaehyun put his book aside, watching us closely. "Son, don't try to change the subject. Who is this young lady?" he asked, clearly alluding to our late return. Her father narrowed his eyes, studying her. "So this is the girl you mentioned." "Come on, don't be afraid, there are no strangers here," Yao Yukin's mother called softly. She looked warmly at Liu Ruyan, who bowed and timidly approached the sofa. I thought my mother had misinterpreted something, but I decided not to dwell on it. Liu Ruyan looked at me and, receiving my encouraging nod, sat down next to them. I settled in nearby, listening to my mother make small talk. I wondered when she'd managed to prepare for such a reception. Father sat on the sofa, and there was something unusual in his gaze, slight embarrassment or even awkwardness at the sight of Ruyan. He started asking me about my affairs, but I simply waved him off, pretending to be touched by their concern. I placed my hand on the back of the sofa, hinting that I no longer needed their allowance. I was becoming independent. "You have misunderstood the situation, Father," I began. "I just meant that I'll deal with my own problems," I added, trying to smooth things over. He Jaehyun glanced at his wife, a faint smile flashing across his lips. He remained silent, preferring not to develop the argument in the presence of his guest. Instead, he stood up and nodded to me. "Let's go to the office, we need to talk." I complied, but before leaving, I glanced at Ruyan. She looked a little lost, but in her mother's company, she felt relatively at ease. "I hope everything goes smoothly." I followed my father, trying not to look back. I overheard snippets of their conversation, my mother asking Ruyan what she thought of me. I entered the office, closing the door behind me. My father sat down in the chair, and I settled down opposite him, expecting a serious conversation. The thought was swirling around in my head that there were still a few empty rooms in the villa in Chengxi that we might need. "What are you thinking? I didn't bring her here to lecture you," I said before my father could even open his mouth. "Son, don't get so worked up. We're progressive enough to understand your motives. You're an adult now, it's time to think about the future." My father approached and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "We raised you well, so think ahead." His words silenced me. "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling his hand still pressing on my shoulder. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing," I replied, trying to sound confident. "Good. "Go back to the guests and tell your mother not to stay late. The girl has school tomorrow," he said, letting me go and walking me to the door. When I returned to the living room, Ruyan had already gone to rest. My mother looked pleased, though I never learned what exactly they discussed. "Did father say you were planning to move out?" she asked. "Yes, in the next couple of days," I replied. My mother smiled knowingly. "I won't interfere with your life. We were all young once." She lowered her voice, adding sadly, "I've heard rumors about how she was treated in her family. Poor child, don't hurt her." "Don't worry, I'll protect her," I promised, though deep down I knew this union was beneficial to both of us. Mother looked at me, shook her head, and went into her bedroom, and I headed to mine. A room had been prepared for Ruyan next door. As I passed her door, I noticed that light was still shining through. What was she doing so late? I knocked, the door opened quietly, and Ruyan appeared on the threshold, wearing soft blue pajamas. She looked completely different. Her hair was loose, her pajamas made her look soft. She looked at me with mild surprise. "Brother Hekyang, is something wrong?" "I saw the light and decided to check if there were any problems," I replied, hesitant to enter without an invitation. She hesitated, then opened the door wider, inviting me in. The room had a cozy, girlish atmosphere. Mother had done a wonderful job. Everything looked clean and tidy, with textbooks and drafts lying on the desk. I glanced at the notes, mathematical curves. It looked too complicated for an ordinary evening. "It's almost the end of the semester. I'm trying to catch up," she explained. "Can you figure this out on your own?" I asked. I tried to delve into the formulas, but it only gave me a headache. "Listen, you're clearly smarter than I thought," I chuckled. She looked embarrassed. "Really, I'm trying." She sat on the edge of the bed, fiddling with her fingers, clearly feeling out of place. "Do you like the room?" I changed the subject. "Honestly, it feels unreal. My last room was completely different," she admitted. I touched her chin. "Get used to it. This is your home now." After a long silence, Ruyan suddenly asked, "What did you talk about with your father and aunt?" She came up to me, looking me in the eyes with determination. "No, seriously, what was this conversation about?" "It doesn't matter. We were just discussing family matters," I answered evasively, feeling the situation becoming more personal. The girl stood very close. I began to realize that we were getting closer faster than I had planned, and this was causing a strange excitement. Liu Ruyan was dejected and looked for support. I took a step back, sitting down on a chair, and she, as if following some inner plan, appeared very close. "I believe every word you say," she whispered, clinging to me. She was genuinely grateful that I had pulled her out of that hell. Liu Ruyan sat before me, one hand gently resting on the back of my head, the other holding my palm. A subtle, pleasant scent emanated from her, and her face was flushed deep red. She whispered something in my ear, and at that moment she seemed completely different from the frightened girl she had been before. But now was not the time for such conversations. I had to keep my cool. "Stop it," I stopped her gently but firmly. "Girls shouldn't behave like that, especially when the situation becomes so ambiguous. It's too early, Ruyan. Grow up first, and right now you need to sleep." I stood up quickly, feeling my insides twist with embarrassment, and left the room, leaving her in silence. Once in my room, I tried to compose myself. Liu Ruyan, covered with a blanket, tossed and turned for a long time. She was embarrassed by her own behavior and reproached herself for seeming too frivolous to me. Finally, exhausted by her thoughts, she fell silent. She wasn't lying to me. Everything she did was the result of years of psychological struggle with herself. That evening, I couldn't sleep for a long time either. Initially, I had planned everything with cold calculation, but I saw something in Ruyan's eyes that made me doubt the soundness of my strategy. Do I really need to wait for her to grow up? This thought haunted me like an obsession. For Ruyan herself, that day became the point of no return. Even that morning, she couldn't have imagined that her life would change so dramatically. The atmosphere at dinner at the Liu family was tense. Her father, Liu Ming, announced the news as if it were the most ordinary event in the world. He spoke of her leaving home with frightening indifference, as if he were deciding the fate of something other than his own daughter. Her mother, Chen Ziyu, merely raised an eyebrow in surprise, not daring to argue. "What are you planning?" was written in her eyes, but no one dared to ask the question out loud. Liu Ming was elated. The negotiations with the He family had been successful. He was confident he had outwitted He Jianjun by handing over me, his son, as a bargaining chip to secure a lucrative plot of land. "They gave up the land in the east of the city so easily," Liu Ming boasted. and the condition was so trivial to hand over a few of our shops. I didn't expect old man he to agree to the deal so easily. He was blinded by his own greed, celebrating his victory without realizing that in this game he was just a pawn. Her older brother and sister, Wen Yan, clinked glasses, laughing at how easily they had managed to get rid of the unnecessary asset in the person of Ruyan while appeasing the He family. Liu Ming laughed, claiming his son was far smarter and stronger than the stupid heir of the He family. What a blind man he was. His sister, Liu Rui, didn't even hide her irony as she patted Ruyan on the shoulder. Well, little sister, at least you'll be useful to our family. They sarcastically discussed everything, even the fact that Ruyan had dared to wash her sister's limited edition clothes before leaving. The absurdity reached its peak. You can leave a review if you want, her sister laughed, while her father promised to buy her new things to replace the ones Ruyan had ruined. Laughter was everywhere, and it was poisonous. Ruyan sat in the corner, her head bowed over the bowl of noodles she'd made herself. She was an outsider at this party being held at her expense. She didn't utter a word in response to Liu Ming's barbs, continuing to breathe and exist like a ghost. She remained true only to her thoughts. And in this noise she remembered only one name, mine. Only this thought warmed her heart. Gradually the memories began to fade, and she sank into a heavy but peaceful sleep. Back in my room, I thought about this test for a long time. My demoness, Liu Ruyan, proved much more difficult than I had initially imagined. Her actions last night really threw me off balance. Honestly, it took a huge amount of effort to resist giving in to the moment. Luckily, the law is on my side, I chuckled to myself, looking at the ceiling and trying to calm my frantically beating heart. It seemed everyone around me, including herself, thought I was helping her out of nobility, but they didn't know I had my own agenda. I turned off the light, plunging into darkness. The morning greeted us with silence. When Ruyan came out into the living room, I was already busily preparing breakfast. Our eyes met and a strange, thick awkwardness hung in the air. We sat down at the table in silence. I called her, "Sit down, eat something first while it's hot." Then I knocked on my parents' door. They were also awake and ready for breakfast. My father responded in a hoarse voice, "I know, we'll be right out." As we gathered in the living room, the atmosphere grew even more tense. Ruyan was carefully examining something on the coffee table, papers related to the stores the Liu family had recently acquired. Her mother, Yao Yukin, asked curiously, "What's that you have there?" Ruyan began to explain. She wasn't joking, her tone was serious and businesslike. Her father, He Jianjun, listened skeptically at first, but after a few minutes his expression changed. He was amazed. I watched this while sipping my coffee. Ruyan expressed such precise ideas that my father couldn't help but express his approval. She truly was talented, and it was obvious to the naked eye. I had to suppress a grin. My plan had worked even better than I expected. Father was beginning to understand that Ruyan wasn't just a girl from the Liu family. My mother gently nudged me, "Stop looking at her like you want to eat her, go have breakfast before it gets cold." Liu Ruyan sat down at the table, embarrassed by her father's attention. He Jianjun didn't let go of the papers. "How do you like it?" I asked, playing the role of the clueless son. He put the documents aside and looked at me seriously. "That girl has an amazing gift for commerce," he admitted. "Liu Ming is a blind fool to treat her like that, and I confess I also underestimated the situation until I sent my men to inspect that plot of land." "You hit the jackpot, son," my father concluded. I smiled. It was my victory. After breakfast, I had to take her to school. It was quiet in the car. "Sorry to inconvenience you," she said quietly. "Don't be silly, it's on my way anyway," I replied. We pulled up to the school, and the tension I had become accustomed to feeling around her hung in the air again. She left, and I noticed how red her ears were. She was embarrassed by the events of the previous night. I just grinned at her departing figure. It was time to move on to other things. I headed off to meet the others. Q Dai was already waiting for me by the trunk. He was clearly in a bad mood, complaining about Zhou Yun still not waking up, and even managed to take an awkward photo of him. "It's time to get up," he muttered, looking at his sleeping comrade. I sat down next to him. "So, the gun hasn't arrived yet. How much longer do we have to wait in Tangjiang?" Q Dai just threw up his hands. The situation was getting out of control. At that moment, the door swung open. Tang Jiang entered, clutching a heavy bag of documents. "You're talking about this so loudly that you can be heard in the street," he said from the doorway. Qiu Dai fell silent, looking at Tang Jiang. I immediately noticed the bag. It clearly contained something important. So what's going on? I asked. Tang Jiang's expression darkened. It's much worse than we thought. They've gone too far in their machinations. Zhou Yun, hearing this, finally woke up completely. Qiu Dai looked away, clearly unwilling to continue the topic, but Tang Jiang was already laying his cards on the table. That's why we're all gathered here today. Take a look at this, he said, sliding a folder of documents over. It contained a collection of all the Liu family's sins and financial misdeeds over the past few years. We pored over them, realizing the scale of the destruction. Meanwhile, back at school, Liu Ruyan sat in her corner, isolated from everyone else. No one spoke to her, and she herself, accustomed to coldness and neglect, didn't seek out companionship. She had virtually no friends, and her entire school life was a chronicle of loneliness. But today she was out of sorts. Her thoughts kept returning to last night, to the sense of safety she'd found in my villa. She tried to concentrate, but suddenly someone's hand touched her shoulder. Ruyan shuddered and turned around. Sitting next to her was a girl who, until that moment, had seemed completely unsociable. She nodded silently toward the door and whispered, "It seems like someone's looking for you there." Liu Ruyan stepped out into the hallway, her eyes watering with excitement. A short schoolgirl in uniform, judging by her badge, a first year, was standing by the door. "May I ask why you called me?" Ruyan asked quietly. Ruyan felt like she'd seen this girl somewhere before. "You're the third mistress of the Liu family, right?" The schoolgirl looked at her carefully, nodding slightly. Despite the strangeness of the situation, Ruyan didn't feel threatened by her. The girl raised her head, looking Ruyan straight in the eye. "Come with me, I have something to tell you." She tried to maintain her dignity, but the height difference made it look childishly cute and a little awkward. Ruyan followed her, tormented by curiosity and a familiar wariness. Something kind had happened so rarely in her life that every sign of attention from people like He Qiang or this girl was perceived as something suspicious, but pleasant. They stopped in a quiet corridor. The girl turned around and, encouraged, slapped herself on the shoulder, changing her tone from serious to joyful. "Senior, remember me? We saw each other at Grandpa Joe's birthday party last year. I didn't expect to see you here, and especially, well, let's say, in the spotlight because of He Qiang." Ruyan frowned, trying to remember. Then her memory prompted her. She was from the Qiu family. "My name is Qiu Luo," the girl introduced herself, beaming with delight, as if meeting Ruyan was the greatest event for her. "I was absolutely shocked when my brother told me that you were now involved with He Qiang," she added without slowing down. "What are you even talking about? He just—" Ruyan faltered, remembering their recent intimacy. Her face flushed to her ears. "Don't pretend, I see everything." Qiu Luo didn't let up. The girl's reaction was so violent that Ruyan didn't know whether to laugh or be angry. Suddenly the bell rang, deafening and demanding. "Oh, I have to go. See you at lunch." Qiu Luo took off like a hurricane, laughing and racing down the stairs. Liu Ruyan remained standing in the hallway, pressing her palms to her burning cheeks. "What's happening to me?" she whispered, looking at her trembling fingers. Meanwhile, the situation at our meeting was heating up. Liu's group's construction site was riddled with violations, unpaid wages, harassment of workers, and most importantly, large-scale tax evasion. Tang Jiang laid out the evidence, photographs and recordings of the employees' husbands communicating with the cleaners, revealing money laundering schemes. I studied this data, figuring out how to turn it into a crushing blow to the Liu Empire. "That's all we have for now," Tang Jiang said, patting the stack of papers. "But there's one more thing, a more serious one." He looked straight at me. "You asked me to check Liu's group thoroughly. I thought it was just a joke, but they really were in deep trouble. If it weren't for my brother's connections, we would never have gotten to the bottom of it." I read the materials and felt a surge of excitement within me. The group's former owner, Liu, had carefully concealed these sins, but now everything would come to light. I suddenly realized how to use these documents. "Jiangzi, lend me this for a while," I said with a predatory smile. Tang Jiang narrowed his eyes. "Are you planning something? Just don't drag it out." I laughed like a real movie villain. "Liu's group took my land. Well, they don't even suspect that the tomb of their business is located there." "Why are you so sure that this land has such significance?" Zhou Yun asked. I just chuckled meaningfully. "There is only one truth, and you will see it soon." Tang Jiang instantly calculated my move and burst out laughing, realizing the genius of this trap. "You're a cunning old man," Qiu Dai chuckled. "Okay, you're not an old man, but your way of thinking is dangerous." By the way, how is your new guest? Dai suddenly changed the subject, looking at me with interest. I told them everything, how she lives with me, about that night in the bedroom, about her embarrassment. So you mean to say, Jo-yoon began. Now you have a beautiful young girl living with you and you are alone under the same roof, Dai finished for him. Your parents will move out and it will be just you two, Tang Jiang added with a wink. Well, brother, you're finished. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Thoughts of ending this ambiguity warred with the desire to simply enjoy the moment. Maybe we could at least get a bite to eat while you bury me, I asked with a sigh. By the way, I forgot to mention, Luo and Liu Ruyan go to the same school, I added. Dai looked at me knowingly, anticipating the consequences of this acquaintance. I was confused, but I quickly realized why Ruyan had been acting so strange lately. It was Luo's work. She was clearly working on Ruyan. Now it became clear to me where the blush and the mysterious words came from. Mom, who are you even talking about? I thought, remembering my mother's questions, who suspected me of bullying the guest. My opinion of Luo was strengthened. She was a two-faced schemer who loved to add fuel to the fire. 2 days later, my parents moved out completely, leaving Ruyan and me alone. Before leaving, my father gave me one last piece of advice and my mother said a long goodbye to Ruyan. Our life together had begun. But she spent 90% of her time at school, so the atmosphere remained calm, although filled with some kind of electricity. I decided to leave Luo in Dai's care so she wouldn't make trouble ahead of time. We gradually got used to living under the same roof. Nothing out of the ordinary happened until the first day of vacation. I was sitting in the living room when Ruyan, wearing her pajamas, came up to me. Brother He-kyang, are you busy tomorrow morning? No, what is it? I asked. She took a deep breath and blurted out, then, go on a date with me. The girl, dressed in a JK uniform, looked at me with a mixture of challenge and hope. The next morning, I walked into the living room, fully prepared to go out, and immediately noticed Liu Ruyan waiting for me at the very entrance. She was clearly in the mood for a date, and this time she had dispensed with her usual loungewear or school uniform. She wore a soft blue dress, reminiscent of a calm lake, revealing her slender legs, and stood leaning on elegant white shoes, her graceful hands clasped in front of her. Holding one hand in the other, she maintained an extremely submissive and humble posture, without showing the slightest trace of anxiety or fuss. She chose to leave her long, jet-black hair loose, and in this look she seemed much softer and more feminine than her usual younger sister-like appearance. There was a certain homely comfort about Liu Ruyan's appearance today. Looking closer, I noticed she'd even applied light makeup. Have you been waiting a long time? I asked, leaning slightly toward her. Liu Ruyan looked away at first, then playfully hit me a couple of times. Then she covered her mouth with her fist as if embarrassed. No, I just got here, she replied, calling me out the door. As we stepped outside, the bright sun immediately began to warm us gently. I walked next to Liu Ruyan and couldn't shake the thought, why did she suddenly decide to ask me out on a date? Could this really be some kind of cunning feminine maneuver? Liu Ruyan glanced at me sideways. She spoke seriously, mentioning the other girls, and at that moment it began to dawn on me. After a brief exchange, I understood the reason for today's meeting. Liu Ruyan smiled at me without a trace of hesitation. This girl knows how to surprise. I think you're laughing at me right now, I remarked with a slight grin. Liu Ruyan, you're acting a bit strange today. I think you're right about Wen Yan, I said. She patted my hand in response, but it was so light and gentle that I didn't resist. After all, it was a fitting price for my words about Dai. Can you tell me the answer? I whispered as she removed her fist from her face and stroked my head tenderly. She was about to say something when she suddenly froze in place. Her face suddenly flushed, she shook her head and quietly muttered, maybe not. I see everything and you're only intriguing me more. What are you even talking about? Actually, I'm sure, I began, but stopped short. Liu Ruyan blinked in surprise. What happened? I liked her immediate reaction and I felt a little nervous myself. Are you having some kind of bonus plan today? I need to know exactly what it is. It's a great way to get a guy to pay attention, Su Ryulo chimed in, finishing her slice of cake. She then sternly lectured Liu Ruyan, my brother and I always did this when we played. It's the perfect way to squeeze some extra spending money out of him. Got it? Liu Ruyan listened attentively, nodding diligently as she made notes in her notebook. The key is to do everything naturally, Su Ryulo continued, offering her friend some chips. Sis, let me give you a few more tips. I consulted with my brother. Hekyang is really good at keeping things under control, Liu Ruyan said confidently. Luo, you're a veritable fountain of wisdom, Su Ryulo puffed out her chest proudly. I'm a true master of such social outings, but let's not talk about that. Why did you suddenly decide to ask him out? Liu Ruyan thought for a moment. She felt uneasy. Sometimes she even hesitated to meet my gaze. Q Luo sat down next to me. Well, the day before yesterday I saw him by chance, Liu Ruyan began. After the shower, he was shirtless. That image was burned into my memory, she admitted, lowering her head and lowering her voice to almost a whisper. Q Luo's eyes sparkled with joy. What do you even think of Hekyang? A friend asked. He's wonderful. If I fall asleep, he always wakes me up and he cooks amazing food. Zia Yushi often gives me rides, and if it's raining, he always shares his umbrella, Liu Ruyan continued, not paying much attention. And as soon as he invites me out to eat, I immediately forget about everything. Having eaten her fill, Q Luo was in a great mood. She reclined on the table, smiling contentedly, and gave Liu Ruyan a thumbs up. Go ahead, I believe in you, but tell me, what's the point of this date? Oh, come on, we almost got it, I exclaimed, approaching the claw-wielding slot machine. At this moment, Liu Ruyan's face took on an incredibly serious expression. I couldn't take my eyes off the slowly descending claw. When he successfully hooked the toy by the ears, I held my breath nervously. But anyone who's ever played these machines knows. It often happens that the grip weakens halfway. Liu Ruyan let out a disappointed sigh, watching as the doll fell just before the tunnel's exit. Don't look at me like I'm a total loser, I said, trying to hide my embarrassment. I patted Liu Ruyan's head reassuringly and inserted the last 2 coins into the slot. She sighed deeply, watching my actions closely. I concentrated on calculating the claw's trajectory. Just when my spirits were at their lowest, I pressed the button. After a successful catch, Liu Ruyan joyfully hugged the large teddy bear. We left the arcade. She buried her face in the bear's head, and I thought she was clearly very pleased. It must have been the perfect timing of the button press. Next time it will definitely be better, I said, rubbing my nose. My last attempt was even worse than hers. The doll didn't budge at all. In the end, I had to put in all my effort to win the teddy bear for the girl walking next to me. Her eyes reflected the sunlight, and she looked so happy that I couldn't help but admire her. She gently tugged at my sleeve. The bear was clutched tightly in her hand, and with her other hand she pointed to the milk tea shop across the street. Want a drink? After 2 hours of playing, I was indeed thirsty and nodded. Liu Ruyan confidently pulled me along. She held my hand, and her palm was very soft and warm. It was as if she involuntarily pressed herself against me. I felt Liu Ruyan's ears turn red with excitement, but I didn't pull away or remove my hand. We entered the cafe, and I asked, "Please give us lemon water with reduced sugar." To this she added, "And for me, please, a cup of milk tea with 5 spices, sugar, and mint." Once we were inside, Liu Ruyan finally released my hand. She meticulously listed the orders to the staff. As I watched her, I suddenly found myself feeling a little envious. What happened, honestly, I began. I'm just surprised you know my taste so well, she admitted. I've been studying it for the last 2 days. Hekyang and Liu Ruyan always had a knack for making caustic retorts, but now it seemed like only I was truly prepared for this date. I'll take 5 points off you for those words, I said, putting on a deliberately stern face. But I really like the bear, she added, softening. Okay, then I'll give you 15 points, but don't overdo it, Liu Ruyan. She buried her face in the stuffed animal again. 115 plus 15 is a great result. I was thinking that this girl was really being very sweet. While we were waiting for our drinks, I watched her. It was obvious how much she adored the bear, constantly stroking its fluffy ears. Hekyang, I want to ask you something, she suddenly said. Liu Ruyan turned her head, still hugging her bear. If I grow up, she faltered when she heard the order number 1027. The employee's loud voice drowned out Liu Ruyan's words, and she looked at me in surprise. No, it's okay, she replied and ran to the counter. A little later, we went to see a comedy at the cinema. When we moved on to choosing new clothes, I was once again convinced that Liu Ruyan is a natural-born model. Every outfit she tried on looked perfect on her. I felt like I was performing a true miracle. In a matter of minutes, we had collected a whole mountain of things, but one thing was nagging at me. At the very end, at the checkout, Liu Ruyan suddenly blushed. She picked up a small package and paid for it separately without saying a word about what was inside. Watching her shyness was utterly amusing. I couldn't resist teasing her. In response, this embarrassed senior girl jokingly deducted 10 points from me, but then, her anger softening, she gave them back, incidentally, as we were already walking home. That same teddy bear never left Liu Ruyan's embrace. I couldn't resist asking, "Listen, are you happy today?" Until today, no one has ever invited me just to go out," she replied. "Usually when I'm called anywhere, it's for boring business meetings." Liu Ruyan's voice sounded surprisingly calm. She didn't like to talk about her business, so today was a real revelation for me. I wanted to understand if anything had changed in her mood after we left. What was the outcome? The result was unexpected. She didn't make a scene, but simply looked peaceful. That's why she bought the small handbag she was now holding. I offered to carry all the bags, but she kept the small box she'd bought for herself. She never let me see it. I only caught a glimpse of a black object in the store, but I had no idea what it was. Liu Ruyan merely cryptically mentioned it as a secret tool for the future. I was overcome with curiosity. Why was she so protective of her purchase? We returned home, and I was about to take my things to her room. As I was about to leave my purchases, I entered her bedroom. Liu Ruyan suddenly turned to me and said quietly, "Brother, in 2 months I'll be an adult." I froze, unsure how to react to these words. I quickly closed the door and stood in the hallway, feeling my insides twist. It seemed I'd gotten it all wrong from the start. She wasn't hinting at a birthday present at all. Confused, I turned around and went back to my room, throwing the bags on the floor. The silence was broken by a phone call. It was Q Dai. "Old man did you know Liu Ming has a big press conference the day after tomorrow? Want to go out and have some fun?" Q Dai's voice came through the phone. "Of course, I'd love to see that show," I replied. Their express train to success was about to derail. "That old hag has really gone wild lately," Q Dai laughed. "But either way, their time is up." I realized I'd been too busy with my own affairs lately to notice the old man's. "See you there," I said. "And make sure Zhou Yun doesn't hear what you just said," Q Dai added. "Otherwise, he'll want to take a very quick fall from the top down," he warned. A few days passed after we finished talking, and I found myself at a banquet. After tasting the dessert, I noticed a strange resemblance to what Zhang Lang usually served. Q Dai treated Tang Jiang to a sweet. He frowned, took a bite, and froze. The taste was distinctive, crisp, salty, with a subtle hint of bitterness. Wen Yan and Zhou Yun were whispering quietly nearby. No, Zhang Lang's taste was completely different. I'm sure of it, I decided and stepped aside, watching the three of them. Should I stay away from these three gods? The banquet was organized on a grand scale. The room was filled with nothing but big shots with impeccable reputations. Some of them were even richer than my family. Could they really have handed over those documents? I asked Tang Jiang this question. He nodded slightly. "Don't worry, the timing is perfect, but shouldn't your family be here today?" As soon as I finished my sentence, Zhou Yun gave me a light slap on the back of the head. "Do you even remember why we are here today?" "Does this really belong here?" Q Dai shook his head, looking at me. "Your emotional intelligence sometimes shows up in the most inappropriate places." But he didn't say it out loud. These were my own thoughts. I was silent for 2 seconds. The password to Liu Ming's safe surfaced in my memory. "All the evidence has been collected. 3 people have confirmed the same figure. What else is there to argue about?" An irritating voice behind me brought me out of my thoughts. "Oh, young master I hope my sister, who has been acting rather brazenly lately, hasn't caused you any trouble." Xiaorui was rude, and Liu Jiangyan looked at me as if he was about to eat my sister. He stretched his lips into a fake smile and extended his hand toward me. "Qiang, how old is it?" he said. At that moment, Liu Ming entered the stage. I was about to give a welcoming speech, but instead I simply stared at Liu Jiangyan's outstretched hand. Someone rushed to clear away the snacks before the official part began, but some guests couldn't hide their sly grins. Liu Jiangyan became nervous. "Qiang, did I do something to offend you, right? Or do you like my third sister so much that you've decided to stick up for her? I hope you realize it's not worth the trouble." "Others might stand up for her, but I'm here for the show," I said, accepting the juice from Tang Jiang. I looked into Liu Jiangyan and Liu Rui's eyes, smiling. "Guess who you are, spectators or actors?" The next second, the doors to the banquet hall swung open. A group of people, clearly in no mood for celebration, burst into the room. "In the future, our company, Liu Group, will achieve unprecedented heights," Liu Ming's voice boomed. But in the middle of his speech, he was unceremoniously interrupted. At the head of those entering was a middle-aged man in a strict military uniform. He was followed by a group of people in similar uniforms, several police officers, and serious-looking officials in suits. They quickly surrounded the stage, blocking the path to the microphones. A deathly silence fell over the room. Every eye was fixed on the newcomers. "Mr. Liu Ming, we are the investigation team of the tax inspectorate and the police." The man showed his ID. "We have credible information that your group of companies is involved in a number of serious crimes. We ask you to come with us to testify." Despite the situation, a strained smile still played across Liu Ming's face. "Of course, there's clearly been some kind of misunderstanding here, comrades. Our company has always respected the law," he replied, but the investigative team was adamant. "Regardless of whether this is a mistake or not, we will conduct the most thorough investigation. Please exercise common sense and cooperate with the investigation." The middle-aged man's tone was dry and commanding. He made no distinction, addressing both Liu Jiangyun and Ms. Liu Rui, demanding their immediate obedience. The entire task force formed a tight circle around our area, and I noticed Liu Jiangyun's face instantly lose all color, turning frighteningly pale. He frantically shifted his gaze from the papers in the investigator's hands to the surroundings. "Dad, what's going on?" Liu Rui's voice trembled with poorly concealed horror, and she backed away, nearly hitting the tables. Liu Ming, usually so confident, remained silent, as if speechless. The man in the formal suit accompanying the group took a decisive step forward, extracting new documents from a heavy folder. "Mr. Liu Ming, our investigation has revealed that a major cultural heritage site, an ancient tomb, is located underground in the area of your future sites. We demand access to the excavation. Compensation is provided, of course, but right now, the priority is coordinating with the police." The men exchanged meaningful glances, and it became clear there was no escape route. Liu Ming had the look of a man whose deepest secrets had just been exposed to the public, his taste and methods of work a matter of national interest. With each passing second, his face grew increasingly gray, and his legs seemed to be giving way under the weight of the circumstances that had befallen him. I stood to the side, watching this collapse silently, without uttering a word. I took a slow sip of the refreshing juice. The thought flashed through my mind that my notes taken beforehand had paid off, and now I could leave with a clear conscience. Next to me, Zhou Yun shook his phone slightly, catching my gaze. "I'll make sure all the evidence is included in the case." "I just received a copy too," Qiu Dai added, pushing his glasses up his nose. The tension in the air was palpable, fueled by this sudden and crushing victory. "It all happened at the perfect moment," Tang Jiang said with a hint of pride in his voice. I had no idea who exactly had arranged for the investigation team to visit, but Zhou Yun was clearly deep in thought. "You said Liu Ruyan provided the insurance code," I remarked. "Could it really contain even more valuable information?" "That was entirely possible." I carefully placed the cup on the edge of the table. "Let's get out of here. This place is about to get into real chaos, and we shouldn't be seen in it." We turned and headed for the banquet hall exit, but just before the threshold, I couldn't resist. I turned and looked at Liu Ming. He was so disoriented that he accidentally caught my gaze. In response, I allowed myself a barely perceptible, almost friendly smile. I raised my glass a little higher, saluting him as if to say, "This is the end." Deep down, I knew I was behind this whole thing, but to those around me, it remained a secret. The banquet hall behind us filled with angry shouts as Liu Ming finally realized the inevitability of his defeat and left the room in a furious fit. Outside, the cool evening air greeted us, pleasantly refreshing our thoughts. "What now?" Tang Jiang asked as we retreated to a safe distance. "When will the results of the investigation be clear?" "The Liu Group faces inevitable reorganization or complete bankruptcy," I replied, adjusting the collar of my coat. "The He family will actively participate in the auction to sell off their assets." Qiu Dai nodded approvingly. "We decided that almost all members of our families should be involved in the process of capturing their high-quality resources." "Well then, I'm in too," Zhou Yun snapped, and after saying goodbye to the others, I finally headed home. On the way, my phone vibrated, a message from Liu Ruyan. She said she'd returned home and was cooking dinner. I told her that I was already on my way and offered to open the door. When I entered, the appetizing aroma of cooking wafted through the apartment. Liu Ruyan, who had recently been the center of attention for reporters, was now quietly pottering around in the kitchen. "I just finished," she said, without a trace of excitement in her voice. On the table, as usual, stood 3 dishes, served with impeccable neatness. It was simple home-cooked food, but the beans were especially good. I tried the braised pork, it literally melted in my mouth. It's delicious. When did you learn to cook like this? I asked, genuinely impressed. She shrugged. When I lived there, they often forgot to feed me, but it was even better for me. No one stopped me from being in the kitchen, so I taught myself. She put a portion of fresh green vegetables on my plate while we discussed the latest news, where the name of her former father was thundering. I ate while watching her and asked, "What do you really feel now, watching them fall?" Liu Ruyan continued eating calmly, her movements measured. No particular failings, emptiness. They were never my family. Seeing what they've come to, I feel nothing but relief. She raised her head and her eyes were clear and bright as never before. Since the day you took me away, my only family is you and your aunt and uncle, and I also have these broadcasts where I communicate with people. Want to take a look? She asked. I nodded and she showed me snippets of her broadcasts. I think I can eat 2 more bowls of rice, I laughed. Don't overeat or you'll get a stomach ache, she gently admonished me, taking my phone. After dinner, we didn't discuss the Liu family's affairs anymore. Time flew by and soon Liu Ruyan's birthday arrived. The morning began not with an alarm clock, but with an insistent ringing of the doorbell. I opened the door and was stunned. Standing on the threshold were Qiu Dai, Qiu Liuliu, Zhou Yunhe, and Tang Jiang. Each of them was holding a gift bag. What are you doing here so early in the morning? I still looked pretty sleepy when they all shouted in unison, "Happy birthday, birthday girl." Qiu Luo laughed. Ruyan invited us herself. Are you still asleep? I rubbed my eyes and finally realized what I looked like. I was wearing my old dinosaur suit. It was a gift from Mom. It's convenient. I tried to justify myself. Qiu Dai burst out laughing. Dragons are powerful, He Qiang, I agree. If you continue this, I'll really cover my ears, I grumbled, letting the guests into the house and hurried to hide in the bedroom to change into something more suitable. When I returned, Liu Ruyan was already on her feet, beaming as she accepted gifts in the living room, dressed in a simple yet elegant white dress. Her hair was neatly styled, and she looked surprisingly fresh and happy. I walked up to her and handed her my gift. Her eyes sparkled in a special way at that moment. Thank you, she smiled so sincerely that it warmed my heart. I asked her not to open my gift right away, suggesting we wait until after the celebration. Zhu Zhuliu ran up to us. Little sister Ruyan, my brother brought a bunch of meat for the barbecue. How about we have lunch in the courtyard? She suggested. I looked at Liu Ruyan, who gave me a questioning but satisfied look. I nodded and we began preparing. Qiu Dai volunteered to help with the grill, and the whole morning turned into a bustle of laughter and good humor. The atmosphere of a true celebration permeated the villa. Liu Ruyan was constantly smiling. I'd never seen her so open and relaxed before. We were halfway through our barbecue. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Someone had disturbed our privacy. I sighed, asked everyone to continue, and went alone to answer the uninvited guest. Suddenly, a figure I least expected appeared on the threshold of the villa. It was Liu Rui. She looked completely exhausted. Dark shadows lay under her eyes and they were crimson from crying. She stood trembling, seemingly on the verge of hysteria. I couldn't help but frown, feeling hostility welling up inside me. What are you doing here? My voice sounded cold and wary. I blocked her path, not wanting to let an uninvited guest into our cozy world. Liu Rui looked away. I want to see Ruyan, she whispered, barely able to get the words out. Dad and brother, they were just taken away. Our house is in chaos. Everything is turned upside down. Mom begged me to find Ruyan. Maybe she can at least help us now. She looked at me pleadingly. I only frowned deeper, remembering how this family had treated her before. Now I clearly remembered the life they had prepared for her, how they poisoned her, how they used her. Liu Rui bit her lip, unable to meet my gaze. I know we were wrong, but He Qiang, who is this person? Why are you so protective of her? She muttered. A voice came from behind me. Liu Ruyan came to the door, and upon seeing her sister, she froze for a moment, stunned by this visit. Ruyan, we made a mistake, please, can you? Liu Ruyan's voice trembled. Liu Ruyan listened to her in silence. Her face remained calm, only her fingers clenched slightly. If you've come to apologize, I accept your apology, she said firmly. But if you've come asking for help, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I can't help you in any way. My ties with the Liu family are severed forever. Ruyan, we're family, Liu Rui cried out in despair. The word family sounded pathetic on her lips. Liu Ruyan only smiled bitterly. Family, the one that treated her like a servant or a commodity to be traded, the one that disappeared when she was at her wit's end. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. Since the day I left that house, I have no family other than those I chose myself, she snapped. Liu Rui opened her mouth to retort, but the words stuck in her throat. I didn't wait for her to continue and simply closed the door in her face. It's okay, I don't need their begging, Liu Ruian said, returning to the living room. As I said before, I couldn't care less about their fate. They got what they deserved. Liu Ruian shook her head, pushing away the unpleasant thoughts. Let's get back to our barbecue. The meat won't cook itself. The evening flew by in a festive atmosphere, and this day became truly special for us. When the last guests had departed, silence fell over the villa. Liu Ruian began opening the gifts with childish delight. With each new package, her joy grew and her cheeks flushed with excitement. I noticed she'd clearly indulged in a couple of extra glasses of wine while I'd been busy chatting with the guests. This is for you, I said, handing her my box. She carefully removed the ribbon. Inside lay an elegant necklace with a pendant shaped like a tiny teddy bear. You must have loved that toy so much, I smiled. I wonder if you'll like it, I asked. She looked at the jewelry and then at me. That depends on who gave it to me. I walked around her to help her fasten the necklace around her neck. Her skin was incredibly soft, and when my fingers accidentally brushed the back of her neck, a shiver ran through her. She turned, her finger touching the cool pendant. The light from the lamps reflected in her eyes, shining with pure happiness. This is my best birthday ever. Thank you, He Qiang, she whispered. I simply nodded, pleased that the gift was well received. It's late, you're exhausted today, I remarked, seeing her eyelids begin to grow heavy. Liu Ruian bit her lip. Wait, He Qiang, I have a gift for you too. I was amazed. I didn't expect that at all. I prepared it in advance. I'll bring it right away, just wait a minute. She practically ran into her room. I became curious. What was she planning? I stayed in the living room, waiting for her return, but the minutes dragged on. 10-15 minutes passed. Liu Ruian still hadn't come down. I began to worry. Had the wine made her ill? I went upstairs and approached her door. Are you okay? I knocked, but when I didn't receive an answer, I gently pressed the handle. To my surprise, the door was unlocked and swung open. I'd barely stepped over the threshold when someone's strong, flexible arms yanked me forward. In an instant, I found myself on the bed, disorientated by the sudden onslaught. I stared at the ceiling, trying to comprehend what was happening. My head was spinning. He Qiang, I happened to see your collection, she whispered. Her voice was low and confident. She towered over me, and I saw the very thing that made my heart beat faster. One word from her, and I was ready to confess all the sins of the world. She grabbed my wrists, pinning them to the pillow. Her face was unusually bright with a blush. I couldn't tell if she was still under the influence of wine or if it was the determination of a grown woman. I looked at her. Her knees were pressed against the bed on either side of my hips, and her legs were covered in black silk that was impossible to tear my eyes away from. Are you drunk? I croaked. I tried to resist, but within a second I realized I'd lost this battle. I gave in, admiring her, knowing that today everything would change. I drank a little to gain courage. He Qiang, do you remember what you promised me? She looked straight into my eyes, not allowing me to look away. You said you'd wait until I was an adult, right? She leaned in close, and I felt her breath. There was a boldness in her gaze that took my breath away. She was no longer the sweet girl, but a confident young woman. Her tongue barely touched my earlobe, making me shudder. Brother, I'm an adult now, she whispered, and that night became the beginning of a new life for us. The next morning arrived unexpectedly. I was awakened by a phone call. It was around noon, and fortunately I had nothing planned. I carefully pulled my arm out of Liu Ruian's embrace, trying not to wake her, and walked out into the hallway. Yes, I answered into the phone. Yao Yukin's voice sounded worried. He Qiang, help us. Your father has left, and I can't carry all these gifts to Ruian. It turned out she'd prepared a whole bunch of gifts she wanted to give today. Help Mom carry 7 or 8 bags into her room. She noticed I looked a little strange and smiled with a knowing warmth. By the way, do you have time to look in the mirror? She asked. She turned on the video link to show me what the gifts looked like, and at that moment I saw a red spot on my neck on the screen, a mark from last night. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, sunlight flooded the room with warmth. Liu Ruian woke up and stretched, feeling a pleasant lightness. She sat up and the blanket slid down, revealing her collarbones adorned with bright markings. Muffled voices drifted from the hallway. She changed and went downstairs where Yao Yukin was already arranging the gifts. "Wake up, darling, these are all for you," she exclaimed joyfully, unaware of what had happened the previous day. The moment had come to hand over the family heirlooms. Today it was my aunt and uncle's turn. Liu Ruyan rose gracefully from the sofa, and Yao Yukin, my mother, gently took her hand. She looked at her with such warmth as if she were her own daughter, and then gently stroked her shoulder, displaying the genuine care and affection that had long been alien to Ruyan. "Have you gotten used to this life yet?" Mom asked. Liu Ruyan thought for a moment, looking into the distance. "Sometimes I feel like I'm still in a dream," she replied quietly. "Sometimes I wake up in the morning and instinctively expect to find myself back in that tiny, stuffy room in the Liu family home." Mom squeezed her hand tighter, reassuringly. "Don't worry, it's all over now. He Qiang, though he doesn't show it, is actually much more serious and reliable than anyone I know. Since he's decided to take you, he'll be responsible for you to the end," she assured. Ruyan's face flushed bright red, and she lowered her head in embarrassment, trying to hide her smile. "I know, Auntie, and I really appreciate it," she replied, feeling truly loved. Yao Yukin smiled as she opened the gift box, revealing exquisite jade jewelry gleaming inside. "This is something that was given to me when I was very young. Now it's time for you to wear it." No, this is too expensive a gift. I can't accept it," Ruyan tried to object. But Yao Yukin was adamant, placing the jade necklace around her neck herself and adding with a smile, "Don't argue, beautiful. Sooner or later, all this will be yours by right of the family." Liu Ruyan was deeply moved by these words. She finally understood the subtext of my mother's smile. Her face flushed and her eyes filled with tears of happiness. "It's time to sit down to dinner," I interrupted their awkward but touching scene. Several years later, our wedding day arrived. The hall was packed. Relatives, close friends, and business partners had gathered. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Q Dai, the only witness, fussed, trying to hide his excitement with jokes. "Who even came up with this scenario? It's too emotional. I didn't agree on this," he whispered. Zhou Yun and Tang Jiang sat in the front row, watching the proceedings intently. Tang Jiang held the phone, broadcasting the event online, while Zhou Yun adjusted the equipment. "Can we improve the video quality? I want everyone in our group to see this at its best," he asked matter-of-factly. "Liulo really asked for this, so don't you dare screw up the broadcast," I replied. We emphasized the importance of placing Q Dai's mother in a place of honor, symbolizing the family's support. She stood on the stage, her eyes shining with pride and joy as she tried to hold back the tears that were welling up. She held a lace napkin in her hand and quietly wiped her nose, careful not to smudge her makeup. Tang Jiang blinked involuntarily, looking at her. He, too, couldn't help but shed a tear. Zhou Yun merely nodded silently, trying to remain calm, though his eyes, too, were filled with tenderness. The music started playing, the very song we'd been preparing for so long. At that moment, even the most stern guests couldn't contain their emotions. The heavy doors slowly slid open, revealing Liu Ruyan in a dazzling white wedding dress. The veil was pulled back slightly, revealing her radiant face to the world, who walked her down the aisle. To my surprise, she was walking completely alone. She stood there at the head of the aisle, looking at me with an expression as if the whole world had ceased to exist. A whisper ran through the hall. The guests looked at each other, not understanding where the bride's father was. "Why is the bride alone? I heard it was the same girl from the Liu family," whispered the crowd. "Apparently, because of the scandals with her family, she decided to sever all ties. What a pity that no one is guiding her," others sympathized. Liu Ruyan ignored the gossip. She walked steadily, her head held high. Step by step, she approached the stage. Her gaze never left me for a second, and absolute determination was evident in her eyes. There wasn't a single member of her family around, but she looked more confident than anyone I'd ever seen. She was the queen of the moment. Looking at her, I suddenly remembered the girl who once sat in the backseat of my car. She then asked me why I chose her. Now I knew the answer. I wanted to see her like this, independent, strong, and walking under the bright sun toward her destiny. She came up to me. She placed her hand in mine. I held her hand and felt how long I had waited for this day. "Not long?" I asked in a whisper. "Just a few years," she replied with a smile, her eyes slightly red with happiness. The priest began the ceremony. "We are not here to listen to the opinions of others, Mr. He Qiang," he said. "Are you willing to take Miss Liu Ruyan as your wife, for richer or poorer, in sickness or in health?" "Yes, I am willing," I replied without a moment's hesitation. "Are you ready to become Mr. He Qiang's wife?" he asked her. The cleric froze, waiting for an answer. I don't need to ask, I already answered that question a long time ago, Liu Ruyan replied, laughing so sincerely that the hall fell silent with emotion. Xiu Luo burst into tears, clinging to Kyudai. Brother, did you see? Sister Ruyan responded so coolly. Kyudai looked confused but happy. I saw everything, and that was the most wonderful answer, I smiled. It was time to exchange rings. I took her hand. I noticed a tiny scratch on her finger, a mark from when we were just starting out. I put the ring on. It fit perfectly. Now it was her turn. Her hands were shaking slightly. I haven't worn a ring in a while. I'm nervous, she whispered. Don't shake, I'm here, I reassured her, even though my insides were churning. She took a deep breath, looking into my eyes. I whispered, you don't regret last night, do you? She blushed and stepped lightly on my foot, making me smile. The groom may kiss the bride, the priest announced. I lifted her veil, admiring her flawless makeup. But the eyes, those same clear and bright eyes that I fell in love with, remained the same. Brother He Qiang, she called to me tenderly. I didn't respond with words, I simply leaned over and kissed her. The room erupted in applause. Xiu Luo nearly fainted with delight. Later, after the banquet, Ruyan whispered in my ear, thank you for waiting until I grew up. During dinner, Liu Ruyan changed into an elegant wine-red dress. We approached my brother's and friend's table. Kyudai was already tipsy. He stood up unsteadily and raised his glass. He Qiang, I drink to you, so many years together, and finally I see you happy. I sipped my wine, joining in the toast. Don't fall, you still have to see us off, I joked. Kyudai waved his hand and immediately fell asleep right there on the table. Zhou Yun helped him come to his senses with a sigh. Tang Jiang, however, didn't let go of the camera. Hey, you two, stand together, I'll get the best shot, he commanded. Liu Ruyan snuggled up to me, smiling sweetly at the camera. 2 words, simply perfect, Tang Jiang commented, looking at the screen. We'll hang this photo on the wall as a wedding heirloom, Ruyan decided. Zhou Yun just chuckled, looking at our happiness, rubbing his chin. He doesn't even have a girlfriend and he's already giving advice on wedding photos, Tang Jiang teased. Zhou Yun, do you want to fight right here at my wedding? I asked jokingly, approaching their table. Qiu Luo sat next to us, her eyes red from crying, but when she saw us, she opened her arms wide, ready to celebrate until dawn. Sister Ruyan, I want to hug you so much. Xiu Luo, beaming with delight, rushed toward her. Liu Ruyan smiled warmly and embraced her, stroking her back. Xiu Luo pressed her cheek against her shoulder, studying her friend carefully. You really are happy, aren't you? She whispered, as if afraid to spoil the moment. Of course I'm happy, otherwise my brother would have had a hard time. He'd have to be sent for forced treatment for his cold indifference, Liu Ruyan replied jokingly, gently patting Xiu Luo on the back. Xiu Luo pulled away and suddenly became suspiciously serious. Brother He Qiang, she said, looking me straight in the eye, if you dare treat Sister Zhu Yan badly, I will never forgive you. I won't agree to anything like that. Why don't you agree? I asked, smiling slightly at her determination. Because I'll make your brother leave you. I won't let you hurt her, she declared. Kyudai, who had been standing nearby and eavesdropping on our conversation, choked on his drink. The evening was inexorably drawing to a close, and the banquet hall was gradually emptying. Liu Ruyan went to the ladies' room to touch up her makeup before leaving, and I retreated to a quiet corner to drink a glass of water and rest. Suddenly, someone else appeared from the shadows. It was Liu Rui. I hadn't seen him for many years, and this meeting came as a complete surprise to me. He was dressed in simple, everyday clothes, and there was no trace of his former arrogant bearing. He looked almost broken as he approached me timidly. I involuntarily tensed up, not knowing what to expect, and remained silent, waiting for him to speak first. I just wanted to see Ruyan, he said quietly, looking down. I know she doesn't want to see me. I have no right to even show myself to her, but today is her wedding and I couldn't not come. He looked up at me with wet eyes. Can you tell her something from me? Just apologize and wish her happiness, please. I studied his face for a few seconds, then shook my head. No, tell her yourself. Liu Rui was visibly taken aback. At that moment, footsteps were heard behind her. Liu Ruyan returned and, seeing her brother, stopped dead in her tracks. They stood a few meters apart, face to face. Liu Ruyan looked at him for a long time, and there was so much pain in that look. Liu Rui's lips trembled as he struggled to find the words, but Liu Ruyan beat him to it. She spoke calmly and firmly, Your blessing, I have received it. Liu Rui's eyes turned red and he was close to tears. What happened before is in the past, Liu Ruyan added, cutting off his attempts to justify himself. I will not forgive you. But I'm not going to hate you forever, it's too tiring, she said, sitting down to adjust her dress and looking at me tenderly. I'm fine now, I have a husband I love, I have a new family, I have loyal friends, that's enough. Liu Rui nodded silently, tears streaming down his cheeks. He turned and walked slowly away, looking back only once at the threshold. Soon he was lost in the crowd of guests, vanishing from our lives forever. Liu Ruyan leaned against me, sighing heavily. Are you okay? I asked. She raised her head, smiled, and nodded. Everything's fine, let's go, the guests are waiting. The celebration came to an end. The guests left, and my friends and I headed to our cars. Zhou Yunhei and Tang Jiang took over as drivers. We spent a long time discussing the day, looking out the windows at the night. Zhu Luo ran to the car to hug Liu Ruyan again. She whispered something in her ear, causing Ruyan's face to suddenly glow bright red. Zhu Luo, pleased with herself, waved to us and returned to her car. She even gave us a reassuring pat on the shoulder before closing the door. The cars drove away and the villa finally sank into silence. We stood at the entrance, watching the last taillights fade. Tired? I asked. She pressed herself against me, feeling a pleasant heaviness. My feet hurt a little from the heels, but it's a pleasant tiredness. Then let's go inside. We entered the house where everything was prepared for our wedding night. The bedroom door swung open and I barely recognized our room. Everything was tidied, there were new sheets on the bed, and rose petals were scattered everywhere. A fragrant candle burned on the bedside table, and a bottle of fine wine and 2 glasses stood nearby. Liu Ruyan froze, stunned by the sight. It looks like Ae prepared everything, I chuckled, approaching the bottle. Want a drink? I asked. She shook her head, admitting she'd had enough alcohol for the day. I nodded, understanding her, and we went our separate ways. She went to the bathroom, and I stayed to wait. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the measured sound of water in the bathroom, and felt myself being filled with peace. My emotions were still warring inside me. Many years had passed since I first took her from Liu's house. It seemed like this long chapter of our lives had finally closed. She was no longer the silent high school girl hidden in the shadows. The bathroom door opened. Liu Ruyan emerged, dressed in light silk pajamas, her hair damp and fragrant. She sat down in front of the vanity to freshen up. I walked up to her, gently taking the towel from her hands. Let me help, I said, and she, after a slight hesitation, gave way to me. I carefully began to dry her hair, looking at her reflection in the mirror. He Qiang suddenly broke the silence. You yourself said today at the wedding that only a few years have passed, and it's true. She looked at me in the mirror. Just a few years, do you really think that's so little? She asked. I thought about it. What do you mean? Because you have no idea how long I've been waiting for this moment, she replied. I put the towel down and picked up the hair dryer. Do you know what it was like for me to watch you grow up every day and hold back? Can you imagine what a challenge that was? She laughed back. What did you think? Was I an easy target? The warm air from the hair dryer gently enveloped her hair, and she sat quietly, enjoying the moment. Every now and then she would catch my gaze in the mirror, and there was more than just love in her eyes, there was devotion. I turned off the hair dryer and a comfortable silence fell over the room. She gathered her hair and looked at me again. Brother He Qiang, thank you for waiting for me, she said so sincerely that it took my breath away. I bowed my head to her hair. It was the best choice I ever made, I replied. She turned to me, her eyes glowing in the soft candlelight. She wrapped her arms around my waist, pressing her whole body against me, and raised her head. With irony and tenderness in her eyes, she whispered, Well, can't you stand it anymore? I only hugged her tighter. What do you think? Don't you know what night it is? I asked, looking down at her. Liu Ruyan burst into a loud, happy laugh, and in that sound our entire past drowned out, giving way to our shared future. You know, Liu Ruyan whispered, looking into my eyes, over the years you've become a real man, someone I can rely on. Who, me? I asked with a smile. She bit her lip thoughtfully. Remember that evening a few years ago, when you were sitting on a chair in your pajamas and I came up to you? You asked if I wanted to repay you in kind. My body suddenly flushed with memory. You really remember that? I breathed out. Of course I remember. I leaned over and poked you in the ear, then ran away before you could grab me. She laughed happily, remembering that childhood innocence. She reached out, grabbed me around the neck, and gently pulled me down, reducing the distance between us to a minimum. The scented candle on the nightstand flickered, casting whimsical shadows on the walls, and the moonlight softly silvered the room. The night was endlessly long, and we belonged only to each other. This long narrative of our life has come to an end. There were moments when I felt a bit harsh, but over time I grew accustomed to our quiet harmony. The wedding was just a beautiful capstone to the series of trials we've endured hand in hand. Her light jacket hung over the back of a chair, and her silk belt was thrown carelessly nearby, a symbol of our past, which now became our shared history. The next day, when Liu Ruyan was tidying up her wardrobe, she suddenly called me. "He Qiang, come here and look at this." I walked up and saw in her hands the very same silk belt from the dress that we bought on our very first date. "What is it?" I asked. She straightened the fabric with a mysterious smile and pointed to a line of words embroidered directly on the back. I took a closer look, carefully written in black thread, "For the future, Mrs. He." I froze, stunned to the depths of my soul. When did you manage to write this?" I muttered. "Not me," she said, narrowing her eyes slyly. "It was that very day. You did it yourself while I wasn't looking, although now you probably don't remember." I strained my memory, trying to reconstruct the events of that day, and suddenly everything came into view. That day, the seller put the dress in a bag, and while I was waiting, I accidentally pulled out this belt and, unable to resist, left a message on it, thinking that no one could see. "I thought you wouldn't notice." She touched my nose with her finger, but I saw everything back then. She carefully folded the belt and put it away in the box. That evening, when she fell asleep, I stared at that box for a long time, realizing how deeply she had felt everything from the very beginning. "Why did you keep quiet all these years?" I asked her later. She raised her head, her face beaming. "He Qiang, you asked me back then if I wanted to marry you." I answered seriously, "and I was just waiting for you to grow up to it." I looked down at her and suddenly realized that this girl had been leading me by the hand all these years, knowing more about my feelings than I did. She watched my every move, kept track of every little detail, but never pressured me, giving me the opportunity to become who I am today. "Liu Ruyan," I said, "sometimes you can be truly frightening." She just blinked innocently in response. "Why?" "Because your patience is limitless. How can a person wait for years without burning with impatience?" She thought for a moment and answered seriously, "Because when you know what you're waiting for, any time flies by." I was shocked by her answer and smiled. It was the same smile I fell in love with many years ago. "Well," I agreed, "I guess you're right." Meanwhile, our show continued on the internet. People were discussing every detail of our personal life. "Today, Sister Ru Yan and brother He Qiang finally got married," they wrote online. "I cried all day. I didn't think the ending would be so beautiful." Fans of our couple wrote, "I cried from the moment they met until the very moment of their wedding. My life is now filled with happiness for them." Ru Yan was truly shining, and I tried to be the perfect support for her that day. When they exchanged rings, her hands were shaking so much, and He Qiang said something to her and she immediately calmed down, they discussed in the comments. "Haha, and how she stepped on his foot when he wanted to kiss her. That was so cute," the fans laughed. "God, I died of tenderness when he hugged her after she pricked him a little," wrote those in love with our couple. A month after the wedding, I walked into the kitchen where Ru Yan was preparing dinner. She had become a true master of cooking, although before she could only boil noodles. We joked with each other as usual, remembering how we began our journey with simple student lunches. She put more on my plate and I, in return, made her some light soup. We couldn't stop laughing. Watching this, my friends joked that we had become a couple with a silent love disorder, where every gesture was worth 1,000 words. 6 months later, rumors of pregnancy began to circulate. I posted a photo online with the caption, "Updated, thanks." Congratulations poured in, and I proudly responded to each one. Ru Yan just laughed as she watched me happily accept congratulations from the whole world. And so, a year later, our daughter Zaya Aba was born. When I brought her home, Ru Yan was beaming with happiness. I held the baby in my arms and felt like I was the proudest father in the world. We debated for a long time about the name and eventually settled on He Nyan, which meant memory of our long journey. "Don't be embarrassed," Ru Yan told me. "You're officially a dad now." "He Nyan, a nice name, and who is Nyan? This is our little celebration," she smiled. I looked at them both and realized, this is exactly what I had been waiting for all these years. 3 years later, I took Nyan to an amusement park. She ran ahead, braiding her hair, and called out loudly, "Mama Ru Yan." She ran up to us, grabbed my hand, and called me Dad, and at that moment I realized that our happiness had become endless. "Laluo, come here," she called, and we all gathered together. The evening in the park was filled with laughter, and I caught myself thinking that even this bustle was so much better than the silence and empty walls that once surrounded us. Being together, feeling each other's warmth, that was our true richness. When we approached the wooden horse carousel, little Nyan absolutely refused to ride alone. She insisted that Ruyan and I sit next to each other. At my height, I looked utterly ridiculous on this tiny horse. My feet barely touched the ground and I kept bumping into the railings. The look on my face, so comically serious, made Ruyan laugh until she cried. She took a dozen photos capturing this absurd yet oh so happy moment, and we headed home, overwhelmed with emotion. The evening was drawing to a close. Nyan, exhausted by her experiences, fell asleep as soon as she touched her pillow. I gently embraced Ruyan, feeling her press against me. We sat for a long time in the dim light of the nightlight, holding hands. In that silence, where only the child's measured breathing could be heard, time seemed to stand still. I followed them at a distance, watching the streetlights cast a shadow across their silhouettes. Suddenly, a powerful feeling of nostalgia overwhelmed me. I remembered those difficult years when I was alone, when I couldn't even breathe deeply from longing, and how everything had changed. Now my whole life lay before me, our little family of 3, worth enduring any hardship for. Time flies inexorably, erasing the sharp edges of past grievances from memory, but that doesn't matter at all. I'm ready to live like this for the rest of my life, coughing from an excess of feelings or from simple happiness, which still seems like an incredible gift. This cough is a symptom of love, and there is nothing more beautiful than knowing that everything we've experienced has brought us to this very moment. Life goes on, and now we have everything we could ever dream of.